Air India and its troubles don't seem to end anytime soon. The airline continues to face flack, skepticism, and a lack of trust following the devastating plane crash in Ahmedabad. A total of 275 people were killed after AI-171 Ahmedabad to London Gatwick crashed seconds after takeoff at the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport. 241 passengers on board that flight were killed and only one miraculously survived. The rest of the casualties were suffered on ground after this plane crashed into a nearby medical college. Now, we still don't know how this plane crash happened just within seconds, but today the focus is on the role of the Tata Group, which is owner of Air India, and the airline's management itself. After the crash, Tata Group had announced compensation for the families of the victims. The first one was a financial assistance of 1 crore rupees each, and subsequently it announced an additional 25 lakh rupees each to help meet the immediate financial needs of the families. Now, there's nothing new in awarding such compensation. It is a standard operating procedure after any crash. Any airline involved in such a case has to compensate the family. So Air India too is no exception. But in Air India's case, questions have been raised in the manner in which this compensation process is taking place. And these questions are being raised by families of the victims themselves, along with their lawyer. They allege that Air India is making the compensation process tougher, subjecting the families to harsh conditions, exercising undue pressure, and even threatening them for filling the form which awards them compensation. Air India on its part has said it takes these allegations very seriously and has clarified their side of the story as well. Hello and welcome, I'm Shubham Chauhan. Let's get started. So there's a law firm in the United Kingdom called Stewart. It is representing over 40 affected families of the Air India crash. Peter Neenan, who's a partner at Stewart, slammed Air India for handing out a complicated questionnaire on compensation to the families. The complications include tough legal terms which a common person won't understand. That is the argument being given by the lawyer. These terms, Neenan claimed, could be used against the families in the compensation process later on. He also goes on to point out that Air India is coercing his clients into making legally significant financial disclosures, which he calls appalling. UK media portal, London Evening Standard, and The Guardian were among the first to put out this story. These publications have put out the questionnaire that is being given to the families, and you'll see that questionnaire on your screen. It is 4 pages long, and the questionnaire asks for details of the family members of the victims, including name, date of birth, relation to the victim, etc. But it is the portions marked in yellow that is drawing attention, that is the center of the controversy. For instance, there is a yes or no question whether the family member was financially dependent on the victim. Then there is also a section called additional information, if available, on the victim's employment status, what he or she did for a living, details of the employer, etc. Now, basically, lawyer of the bereaved families points out that asking such sensitive financial questions is an attempt by Air India to reduce the final compensation amount. Peter Neenan, who is the lawyer representing the families, says that asking such specific financial details is unethical. And in this process of illicit complications, the lawyer says Air India might be trying to save nearly 1,050 crore rupees. After all, the form also supposedly says that response of the family members would decide the final compensation amount. In fact, the Evening Standard goes on to draw an inference on the question of this financial dependency bit that we just told you about, the yes and no question. The news portal says that the bereaved will not receive the ex gratia transfer unless they fill the document revealing their financial circumstances. Reports also say that some families claim officials are banging on their doors, trying to get them to sign the papers forcefully. Otherwise, they will not be considered for compensation, is what the allegation is. In fact, a family member of the victim was quoted saying, "The conditions where they asked us to complete the questionnaire was unacceptable. In a crowded, hot corridor with unsuitable chairs and desks. There was no privacy whatsoever. They asked us for information about dependency, but there was no specifics about what they meant by that, whether financial or otherwise. I felt pressure at the time under extremely distressing circumstances following a catastrophic loss." The UK law firm has advised the families to not fill these forms without seeking proper legal guidance. It has also slammed Air India for taking grieving families of the victim on a ride and attempting to deprive them of compensation that they are entitled to. Now, here are some facts. Compensation is not some act of generosity by any airline. Like I said at the very beginning, it is the rule. Airlines are mandated under the Montreal Convention of 1999 to compensate the families of the victims. And India is a signatory of this convention. It became a signatory in the year 2009. This convention lays out very clearly what an airline has to do when it comes to such tragedies. A minimum threshold of SDR has been set for air crash compensation. Now, SDR stands for Special Drawing Rights. It is an international unit that is used to calculate compensation amounts in international air travel or incidents like air crashes. Now, in case of an air crash, the minimum compensation is 128,821 SDRs, so which roughly translates to 1.5 or to 1.8 crore rupees. This amount is adjusted periodically, keeping the exchange rates and other factors in mind. But in short, Air India has to pay 1.5 crore rupees or thereabouts to the families as compensation that is mandated by the rule. Now, what the Tata Group is giving the families is in addition to this 1.5 crore rupees that has to be paid by Air India. Now, the Guardian points out that generally families are not required to do anything besides providing proof of identity to the victim and sign a receipt. But here's the point. For any airline or authority to determine who has to be given the compensation, they need details of the family members of the victims to ensure that the compensation amount reaches them correctly and seamlessly. And that is what effectively Air India is saying in its defense. The airline has rejected all allegations of threats, coercion of family members, saying that the media reports are unsubstantiated and inaccurate. Air India said they cannot process compensation claims when there is an information vacuum. They need details of the families. It said that they've kept the questionnaire as simple as it can, and it added that the question on financial dependency on the victim is part of a standard, formal, and a fair process in order to establish the family relationship between the victim and the family members. According to the airline, interim payments have already been made to 47 families and documents of 55 more are under process. Air India also denied the charge that their officials visited the homes and forced the families to sign the forms. Air India said that no such thing has happened. The airline said that the forms could be submitted either in person or by email, adding that they are not exercising any sort of pressure on any family. Furthermore, on the reference of the difficult conditions for filing the form, the airline said that the forms being filed at the hospitals or morgues were completely unrelated or unconnected with the compensation forms by Air India. At the same time, Air India added that they are mindful of the state of the families at the moment, who are of course devastated by the loss. The airline said that all necessary measures are being taken and that they are still in touch with all families to ensure that this compensation process happens seamlessly. That's all we have for this report. Thanks for watching.